wow, you haven't had tantrums for 16 years?
Parenting is a skill.
The more you can look at it from all different angles, the better you understand that subject.
The results we want are earned.
Behind all of them is our respect for our children's free will.
No human being wants to be controlled.
They need to be maturing and progressing.
Parenting should be one of the greatest joys in your life. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Extraordinary Family Life Podcast. We're your hosts, Greg and Rachel Denning, bringing you some more goods today about attachment and what it is and what it isn't, parenting. We want to share as many strategies as possible and
As many angles as possible.
yes, so that we're not only are we understood, but that we cannot be misunderstood. But it's so hard to not be misunderstood because every one of us is operating through our lens. So when we say, hey, you should do this, it gets misinterpreted and misapplied. And they're like, oh, the Denning said we should hold our kids. So now I'm putting them in a headlock until they calm down. It's like, that's not what we meant.
Well, that's an
Not
extreme
there.
example.
Right.
But we did get an email that we want to talk about and talk through because I feel that it is clarifying and more information is helpful, especially in this series. I mean, essentially, it's a series now that we're doing where we're talking about, for lack of a better phrase, attachment parenting. And like I mentioned in the previous 2 episodes, I really do feel that this is the key piece that so many parents are missing. This is the foundational piece that we have used that has made all of the difference in our parenting. It's the very reason that we essentially eliminated tantrums from our life. You know, I had one mom respond. They were like, wow, you haven't had tantrums for 16 years? That means your oldest child was 6. And our youngest at the time was 2 when our oldest was 6, because she's now 18, our 4th child. And of course, our youngest 7 wasn't even born. So yeah, and you know, you and I were thinking about it, like, when is the last time we have a tantrum? I really cannot even think of it. It's been so long. It's been since I think she was 2. And the reason, if I could sum it up, the reason why that's happened is because of attachment parenting. Like, that is the style and the approach that we've used to be able to get those results, which has also prevented teenage rebellion. Like, our oldest did some rebelling and the rest of them have done no rebelling. And we're currently on our 5th teenager, right?
Well, hold on. You have to give context there, even when you say some rebelling. Like, no.
Well, okay, you're right. It's compared to the rebelling I did as a child. Yeah,
it
it was
was-
not any of that.
and
I was
compared to what
partying,
most
doing
people
drugs. I was
are thinking about when you say rebellion, like no, like our little things are so mild,
Yeah,
and it's not okay. We don't want to be misunderstood here either, because a lot of people they hear our story and like, oh, you guys were lucky. You got 7
right.
kids with no
It's not
problems,
that.
no struggles, no challenges. You lucked out. You won the kid lottery, and like,
Mhm.
no, that's not the case. And I
Because-
want to point this out emphatically. Parenting is a skill, and it's a very specific skill that literally has very little to do with how good you are at other things.
Yeah.
And how good of a person you are. It's independent of that. It is a very specific skill. You might be really, really good at marriage and suck at parenting. You might be really good at tennis and suck at parenting.
Or
You might be
business.
great in business and you just can't
Or
parent.
great with people.
Right.
And you still suck at parenting.
Yes, exactly. You might be great in leadership and management, all this stuff, and you're just not parenting, because parenting is a very, very specific skill.
Well-
and so that's why we're getting so detailed in it.
And I just wanted to add on to those specifics because, well, first, our oldest is adopted. So it's not because we just had a genetic winning of the lottery. She's adopted. Then we have kids with ADHD. We have kids with learning disabilities. We have neurodiversity. Like, we have all the things. It's not like you said, it's not like we're just lucky and didn't get any of that. We've got it all, but as you're emphasizing, parenting is a skill. And so you and I, consistently got better and better and better at parenting. That's why we got the results that we did, not just because we were lucky with the kids that we got.
Yep.
I mean, we have amazing kids, but I know that we would have way more problems with them if it wasn't for our parenting.
Well, 100%.
strategies.
Any one of them or every one of them could have gone AWOL.
Absolutely.
In any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. So anyways, back to what I was saying. Yeah, you're right. It wasn't rebellion like most people think of. It was a little rockier as the first and oldest child, adopted child. It was a little more challenging, But point being, we have not had any normal teenage issues with any other of our teenagers, and we're on our fifth child. But so what I'm trying to say though is that we want to make sure in this episode that we clarify things so that we're not misunderstood, like you were saying. We want to address this email that we got, but talk about like, okay, this is not what we mean. This is what we this is definitely not what that means. Like, let's get super clear here so there's not a misunderstanding about when we say this about attachment or these other strategies we're sharing, it does not mean this. It does not look like this. Like, I want to talk through gentle parenting and holding time, all these different things, not what we're talking about. And so that's what this is going to clarify so that we can help you, because the more you can talk about a subject and look at it from all different angles, the better you understand that subject. And so, as we're talking about this as one of the most important parenting strategies and approaches, we need to make sure that we have a very clear picture of what it looks like so that we're not using it in a way that then actually doesn't work and becomes detrimental to the relationship with our child and to their own mental and emotional well-being.
And there's so much bad advice out there.
Yeah,
Terrible,
there's tons.
horrible parenting advice out there. People who have no business writing books, and they're speaking and they're sharing their horrendous parenting ideas.
And as we're going to say in
What
here,
are you doing?
they're getting them from therapists. Like, one of
Right.
the ideas in this email came from a therapist.
Like, this is it's so backwards. It doesn't work. And this, we come across all the time. I see it in emails. I see it on social media. I see these parenting experts, going to present to these groups. I'm like, bro, I've met your family. You have no business being on stage presenting your ideas about parenting. Like, this is, well,
Because results don't lie.
Right.
So the results that you get, and it's also the results that are like kind of behind the scenes and reading in between the lines. Because on the surface, a family can look like, oh, wow, yeah, they're good. They've got it together. But when you learn to understand human psychology, kind of like you talked about in the last episode, you can see certain signs that you're like, that's interesting, because usually that symptom right there is indicative of
a lot
this
of
problem.
deeper problems.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess the other thing is too, is we have to look at like, how are we measuring? How are you measuring parenting success? That is absolutely fundamental to this whole conversation. It's like, well, how do you measure parenting success? A lot of parents, they look around at like the really bad, ugly stuff. And they think, well, I don't have any of that. So, man, I'm crushing it as a parent.
Which, in one level of analysis, is true.
It's
like,
great.
they're
Fantastic.
doing better. And
Great.
that's a good thing. Like,
It is a good
kudos to them.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
But there's this scale, and it goes up and up and up. And as the trends of society keep going farther and farther down and the standard of mediocrity keeps dropping, then as long as we're a little bit above that, we feel like we're winning, we're succeeding, we're beating the odds, which in one aspect, great, fantastic. But we're not playing in that realm. Like, we want absolutely extraordinary. We hold very high standards in a very healthy, happy way. People opt into. Our kids choose to live at these standards. We're not forcing any of that. It's like, it's not this high pressure zone, militarized, denning family. It's none of that. But we're holding such a high standard that, if you're just above mediocre and you're like, this is it, I should write a book. We're not even on the same planet, bro.
Because one of the things that you love to say to me and the kids and yourself is, don't compare down. If you're sitting there thinking like, wow, look at everyone below me, and not that it necessarily has to be in that light or the approach, but if you're looking around and thinking, I'm doing pretty good here, look, compared to everyone
below.
else,
Exactly.
quote unquote, below me, that's not a good measurement of success. And that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, it depends on how you define it. But if you look up at the best parents out there and the best families with the best relationships and the best outcomes, then you realize like, oh, wow, and this is meant to be done in a way that inspires you, not makes you feel like trash, right? But like, wow, there's so much more I could achieve. There's so much more life, fulfillment, joy, happiness, peace we could have. That's amazing. That's what I'm after, rather than, "Oh, I'm doing pretty good compared to the neighbors," right? So how do we do that? And again, that's why we're here talking about it again, so that we can get a more clear picture. Because when I say to you, the foundation of that is attachment parenting, everyone has a different definition in their head of what that looks like or feels like. And it can include gentle parenting, it can include holding time, it can include non-parenting, which is parents that allow their children to do anything, right? Without consequences, without boundaries. Depending on your own upbringing and worldview, a quote unquote attachment parenting can look like a lot of different
Right.
things.
Depending on how you define the quality of a relationship, you might
Mhm.
think, no, I have a great relationship. Because maybe you're comparing it to a horrible relationship you had with your parents. So you
Right.
think, this is great. I have a
Which
way better relationship.
it is an improvement, and that is worth celebrating. We don't want to diminish that in any way. We
Right.
want to praise it, but we also do want to say that
We want to hold a high
there's
ideal.
more.
Yep.
There's more you could be enjoying.
So again, I don't even know how to articulate or emphasize this enough. It's like, and I think the problem is that we're just not exposed to it. We
Yeah.
haven't seen it up close. We don't
Mhm.
know what it looks like. And because we haven't seen it up close, we don't know what's possible. Very often when those kind of things happen, you're like, I didn't even know this existed. I've never seen it practiced. And for real, not the show that people put on, the cruise ship performance, but like, no, this is real. And until you see that, you don't know what's possible. And so I guess part of my invitation today is start redefining how you define success. And as I hear you saying, Rachel, that, what we're referring to as attachment parenting, that is the key difference in the quality of the relationship you have with your children and will have with your children. Get this right, and you'll have a fantastic relationship. Get it wrong, and it'll struggle at best. Again, you have to define it for yourself, and I would say raise the standard. In almost every case, I'd say we could all raise the standard a bit and make sure it's solid, because if we think, well, no, we get along. Of course, there's fighting. All families fight. No, that's not true. And well, there's bickering. It's always going to, no, it's not. We have to,
Sibling rivalry
yeah,
and
none of that crap.
tantrum,
Just
teenage
because it's
rebellion.
common, well, I guess that's the point. It's common. It's average. It's mediocre.
Mhm.
So all that garbage that all of your neighbors are saying, it's normal. That's what kids do. No, that's what unhealthy kids do.
I just made a reel today that I posted on Instagram, and it basically said that the rule of thumb for our parenting is that if other parents are doing it, we're not going to do it. And that's not to be, like kind of in your face or contrarian just for the sake of being contrarian, but it's meant to point out that if you look around at the results that most parents have and you think, I don't want those results, which is definitely something I've done. I want results better than that, then I'm going to look at what other parents are doing, and I'm probably going to do the opposite. Because in my mind, because I put together cause and effect, saying, oh, parents are doing these things and it's getting these outcomes. That's what they're getting, right? So I'm going to do something different in order to get different outcomes. And that's kind of our whole underlying approach. Now, of course, in certain things, there's no correlation or causation, right? So we might do certain things that other parents do because that's not a contributing factor to the outcomes we're trying to achieve. But in the things that really matter, we have to change our methods if we want different outcomes, right? Just like we've talked about. Okay, so let's get into what we do not mean when we're talking about attachment parenting, because that is going to help us make this definition and get really clear about what it actually is and what we actually mean. So we received an email, and I'm going to read parts of it because I don't want to give away too much information that is personal. But it says, your podcast on attachment and moms being touched out was fantastic. My child has zero attachment issues, no senseless crying or tantrums. He's still young, but his cousin is only a few months older and has had hours of inconsolable crying while he is, for example, left at grandma's house overnight. And this began at 4 months old. It's insane. Very sad. I do want to say, and you probably know, that any way of life that is good in principle, and in this specifically, she's referring to attachment parenting, can be twisted and mangled by broken people, especially parents. Absolutely.
Yeah.
True.
And I guess that's why we're doing this episode in particular, to say, hey,
Exactly.
let's make sure this gets applied well.
Correctly, effectively. My mom was all about attachment because she was adopted and neglected. She adopted my sisters, and one of them struggled more than the others to attach. But she did something, and I will never say that she did the right thing.
So let's pause there for a minute because there's some unique situations here that are difficult, very challenging.
Mhm.
So one, the mom was adopted, and that's
Yes.
tough. So right there, immediately, there's some attachment issues. Immediately,
Right.
if you're adopted,
And
because
by default, attachment disorders
yep, yeah. So there's
because
going to
of a
be
lack of proper attachment.
exactly. So in the adoption process, there's no getting around it. There's
There
going to
will be
be
attachment disorders.
attachment disorders, and so the key is to compensate for that and rebuild, like we talked about in the last episode, rebuild all that in healthy ways. And we also talked in the last episode how you have to have enough self-awareness to know where you yourself are coming from. So if you personally have attachment disorders,
Which, here's the surprising news. Haha, most of us do.
right? Exactly. So you have to recognize what yours are and make sure you're not overcompensating
Right.
or undercompensating. If your parents did something off or you're struggling, you feel empty, you're like, well, I feel empty, so I'm going to make sure I smother my child.
Right.
Right. And that's really literally what happens. You're like, I feel empty, so I'm going to smother you. Well, it creates the same emptiness. It's just a different strategy. It's a
Yeah,
different
it's a
tactic.
different form.
It doesn't work.
I often think of the pendulum, and when a pendulum swings, it goes from one extreme to another. And that often is what's happening in our parenting relationships. We are going from what our parents did and then swinging way over to the other side and doing something completely opposite. When what we really need is the middle way, right? Kind of like Buddha talks about, or the yin and the yang. Like we have to find the middle and do the balance of the yin and yang. That's where we find the right application of the approaches that we're trying to implement. So, one extreme on one end or the other is not what we're after. We're trying to be centered and balanced and in the middle.
So then when there's difficult situations, for whatever reason, adoption is one of them. So you have a parent that was adopted and feels the struggle, adopting their children, which there's going to be attachment disorder there. So now you've got it coming from two places. It's amplified.
Yes.
As is always the case, the outcomes we want, the results we want are earned. Attachment is earned.
Not forced, as we'll get into in a minute.
Exactly. So you can't force it. What happens is we think, oh, there's a challenge here. There's a difficulty. I'm going to make this happen. And we try to force it. And it obviously creates the opposite effect. It's the same as I want my kids to be good kids, to be obedient kids. So I'm going to be nobody says this, but they end up being very controlling. I'm going to force obedience. I'm going to force goodness on these kids because I want them to be good. It literally creates the opposite. It pushes towards rebellion or resentment.
Even though sometimes on the surface, it can appear to be creating the outcomes they want. And this is why it can be confusing, because if you look at the family and you look at the surface outcomes, you're like, oh, it's working for them. They're getting the results that they want. But if you look behind the scenes and behind closed doors and in the corners and recesses and dark places, you see there's
A lot of problems.
attachment disorders. There's mental and emotional
trauma,
illness. There's a lot of this going on behind the scenes. And then parents are wondering, well, why is my child struggling with anxiety or depression? Or why aren't they more resilient? Why aren't they more confident? A lot of those issues are stemming directly from these techniques that may appear to work on the surface, but are really causing this damage behind this door, those doors.
And even, well, there's another challenging situation we see often is that the youth or young adult, or sometimes even full-grown adult now, they would never, ever say it to their parents, but they tell you and me often, like, I can't stand my parents. I want nothing to do with them. I don't like, and sometimes they're like, I hate my parents. I literally hate my parents. But the parents don't know that. They don't know. They think, we're winning. We're great parents. This is fantastic. Our kids are doing this and that and the other. And the kids are like, no, I can't stand you. but they never say that to them because they're just being kind and thoughtful, and they comply with the parents. When they're around the parents, they do the things, they say the things because they don't want to, they don't want to have to deal with it. But as soon as they get away from them, they're like, I'm going to do whatever. I'll do the opposite. I can't stand my parents. And so parents who think they're winning are losing because they're getting superficial
feedback. And then unfortunately what we see happen is what we call the train wreck, where something becomes a catalyst that blows it up, and there's a suicide attempt, or there's a crime, jail,
terrible addiction,
arrest, addiction, these horrible things that happen. And parents are like, what happened? I thought things were going so well. And, they end up talking to you and you're like, well, yeah, here was the warning signs here, and here that we know leads to this train wreck. But if you don't do something about it before, well, then you don't know it's a problem until it actually becomes a big, major problem. And so our approach is always like, well, no, let's spot the mile markers. Let's spot the red flags along the way so we can prevent those big things from happening, because we notice and we know what happens to lead up to those. That's where we want to work. Our area of focus for us, and what we try to teach to our clients, is always focusing on the early warning signs to prevent those things. Okay.
Man, parents resist it so much. Our friend's here. She's saying she's like, I even, so I teach habits for successful life for teens, and it's phenomenal. Like it's transformative, and her teens are in it. She's like, they love it. It's so good. It's amazing. The change is incredible. She's like, I even offer our friends and other people in our community, like, I'll pay for the class for your kid to be in it. Like, and she's like, the parents just won't do anything for their kids.
Yeah.
They won't invest. In fact, they don't even have to invest. She's like, I was willing to pay for it.
Right.
It's like parents just won't do things to help their kids get better results.
I know.
It's like,
it's crazy.
It's like, it seems like extra work, or
they wait until there's a drug problem, and then
Right.
they have to pay thousands, tens of thousands per month for rehab, but
usually
they're
it
not
doesn't work.
willing to invest in a class
Right.
that can help prevent problems.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, so it's insane. But let's go back to her question. So she's saying essentially that her mother was adopted. She adopted her sisters. One of them struggled with attachment, and she did something, which she hasn't gotten to yet, that she won't forgive her for because she thinks it's not the right thing. And what it was she forced cuddle time with my sister, who would be screaming her head off until the child, her sister, submitted in silent defeat. It was my sister's therapist that suggested it, and it was called holding time. Now, this is so fascinating to me, because when I was either a new mother or not yet a parent, because we adopted our first, and Greg and I lived in this tiny little farming town in this tiny little place in Utah, and I would every week go to the library and check out tons and tons and tons of books on birth and parenting and homeschooling, like everything I could think of. I would have a whole stack. I would bring them home. I would read them all, and then I would take them back. One of the books that I read, and for whatever reason it really stood out to me, was called Holding Time. It described this scenario that she's talking about. The whole premise of the book was, in order to bond or attach with your child, you would hold them until they submitted to you. So you would, if there was something that happened.
Wait, that's a bad idea. I'm
Bad
going
idea.
to throw it out right there. Really bad idea.
Wondering where I'm going with this, and before you turn off this episode, no, that's a bad idea. And now the idea was, though, that it would create a deeper bond between parent and child, because the child would be upset, the parent would hold them and would keep holding them as they got more and more and more and more and more upset, and would not let them go until they finally stopped trying and gave up and submitted. And then at that point, supposedly the deep bonding was supposed to happen. Now, this doesn't work on so many levels. Like, the psychology behind this is just,
it's insane,
messed.
But that should be obvious. So I want to just point out that it's obvious.
Maybe it's not to some people. So,
but that's why I want to point it out. It's like, no human being wants to be controlled.
Yes.
No human being, even babies, no human being wants to be controlled. We are born with a desire for freedom. So when you control them, when you force any human being, it is either going to inspire fight, rebellion, or deep resentment. So when the child's not, and think just psychologically that disturbing is because it's
It
so
is
the
very.
child's so small. So you take a, I don't know, 3-year-old
You're larger
and
than them.
you hold him. So there's no way you're so much stronger than they are.
Mhm.
There's nothing they can do. So they're just defeated. And they fight, they try to do everything they can. And finally, in exhaustion, they just stop like, I'm defeated.
Yeah.
Look what you've just done
Right.
psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. Wrecking
You're
them.
killing their human spirit,
Yes.
basically.
It's insane.
Like, it's very, very, very disturbing and very sad. Now I forgot what I was gonna say, but
So, I'll go on.
okay.
So the idea of holding your kids for attachment is phenomenal. I love that.
Okay,
Like, we
yes.
love holding our kids. I hold our kids all the time, especially when they're little, is up on the lap and hold them. Like, it made me think of times we had backpacks. We had front packs and backpacks. And I would walk. I've put in hundreds and hundreds of miles carrying my kids. And they're just right on me. And we're out having adventures and experiences and seeing the world and seeing nature and interacting with people. And they're right there next to me. And like, I'll cuddle with them. Even still with our 11-year-old, 8-year-old, I'll read at night and they just cuddle up next to me on a couch and we're reading to them. Like, there's still all this holding.
Yes.
That's a wonderful thing, but you don't force it.
Right.
You don't say, oh, this kid doesn't like me. We're not attached. So come here, child, and I'll hold you until you attach. That doesn't make sense at all. It's not holding until they attach. It's holding until there's defeat, and then you've ruined it even farther.
Yes. And I'm not imagining that, of course, every parent out there that listened to our episode about attachment is assuming like, oh, that's what I'm going to do, hold my children until they give up.
But it's worth addressing because there's a book out there and there's therapists saying you should do this.
Right.
That's insane.
It's illustrative of the problem of, one, all the advice out in the world that is actually not good advice. And this is one example because there's lots of parenting books about sleep training and letting babies cry it out, because in a way that's the same thing that's happening. Whether you're holding your child until they give up or you leave your child alone and let them cry until they give up, it's really the same thing. You're breaking the human spirit because they reach a point where they realize it's pointless if I cry out
This is
for
not a
help
safe world.
because no one will respond to me. It's not a safe world. There's literally a part of them psychologically that dies.
That gets defeated. Oh,
And so
sad.
you know, whether it's that, I've also heard of and read books about having babies on these very strict schedules. So it doesn't matter if they cry and they're hungry at noon, their feeding time is at 1, so they're going to have to wait.
Again,
This is literally advice that's out there. Right?
dumbest ideas I've ever heard. As though any human body is going to be hungry at the same time every day.
Right. Or
That's
that
the dumbest
a
thing.
baby that doesn't have a prefrontal cortex is going to be able to self-regulate to wait until it's their feeding time to want to eat. Like, it's just
We've had parents do it too. It's like, well, no, my kids don't get snacks. They only do meal times. Like, where'd you come up with that dumb idea?
Yeah.
Where'd you come up with this stupid idea of 3 meals a day?
Right.
Where'd you come up with that? Like, it's so
Comes
dumb.
from the industrial age.
Well, right. But it's like, oh, wait a minute. Nobody stopped to question, like, what? Wait a minute. Just stop and think for a minute. What are the chances that every human has the same nutritional needs at the same time every day?
Right.
It's 0.
Yeah.
And every brain is functioning differently. Every body's functioning differently. Every body is different. And we all have different needs.
Right.
And we all think
about, there's
we'll do the same thing.
neurodiversity. Let's talk about biological diversity. Like, every child you have has a different biological makeup and has different needs. So we cannot treat every child the same, and we can't have the exact same approach, schedule, routine that works for every one of them. So the underlying idea behind this concept that we're discussing with holding time, I think, connects to the principle of honoring and respecting individual free will. Because in all of the parenting strategies and techniques that we teach, behind all of them is our respect for our children's free will. Like, whether that comes to attaching, whether that comes to eating, whether that comes to how they spend their time during the day, whether that comes to whatever topic it is, we approach it from this place of, ultimately, we respect their individual will, and we're not going to do something that violates that. That means crying it out. We're not going to let them cry it out, because especially when they're helpless and, you know, there's nothing they can do, we're the ones that have to do the thing for them. We're not going to force them to cry themselves to sleep because that violates their free will. That's not what they want. They want and need psychologically to be attached and connected to us, to be near us while they're sleeping.
So when they're crying out, even as a toddler, or even a little bit older for some kids, like if they're crying out, like that's a symptom.
Right.
It's a sign to us, like, hey, I need help
Yeah.
co-regulating. I need some need is not being met. Like,
Yeah.
help me out here.
I need help
So they're
feeling
pleading
safe.
for help. And many parents are like, you're annoying me. You're bothering me. You're crying. Go cry by yourself. It's like, that's the last thing you need to do, is like go off into solitary confinement and deal with your issues. They can't. They're too little.
Right.
And it's just creating more problems.
Behind all of the things we're talking about needs to be this respect of free will. Now,
people are people, no matter how small.
Yes.
I mean, we've always lived by that. Like the littlest ones, like I will respect a little child because that is a sovereign human being that needs to be respected.
But to be clear and not misunderstood, let us talk about what that does not mean. Because, as one example, there's this reel I've seen on Instagram. It went viral. It's very popular. And it was satire. She was making fun of this idea, but it exists because my oldest daughter, she did work as like a nanny, and there was a woman she knew who had this approach. And it's essentially this idea of like, I'm not going to do anything without my child's permission, right? So this reel that's making fun of it is they're running around Costco, and she's like, it's this whole, I'm not going to even touch you without your permission. So you're throwing a tantrum on the floor, but is it okay if I touch you and if I comfort you? Is that okay? Oh, that's not okay. I'm so sorry. Will you forgive me? That is not what we're talking about. Okay. We're not talking about giving your children license and individual will to do whatever it is that they want or please or whatever comes into their head. It's not about not having boundaries. It's not about free reign, right? Free reign parenting of like, they literally have reign of the house to do everything and anything and create
be
chaos.
absolute
and
tyrants.
Be tyrants.
Because you're like, wait a minute, you're using a 5-year-old brain
Or a 3-year-old brain, or
just wreck everything. And that's why we have parents. That's why children have parents, because somebody's supposed to have a fully developed brain here and make decisions, set up boundaries to keep children safe and teach them and guide them and mentor them and coach them. So yes, we lead, we guide, we set boundaries and safeties. And yes, we set up, hey, no, we don't do that. I know you think that's okay because you're 4, but that's not okay.
Right. And it's my job to teach you, because children actually feel safer when they have very clearly defined boundaries. Like that's what provides their mental and emotional security. And so if we, again, swing the pendulum to the other extreme and think, oh, I'm going to respect my children's free will, so that means they can do whatever because unless they give me permission, I can't instill boundaries. No, that's not what that means. So I want to use one example of how this plays out, specifically related to holding time. Now, you may not recall this because before we started this, I was like, remember I read that book on holding time? And he was like, no, I don't.
I didn't.
I remember reading the book, and I know that I must have told you about it because I remember us using certain strategies in an adjusted way from that book. One of which was when our youngest children were toddlers. Now, you have to also remember that we had 4 children. When our 4th child was born, my oldest child was 4. So we had 4 children under the age of 4. We had a lot of toddlers at once. One of the strategies we would use that I feel was effective at the time was if one of them got upset, and this was back when we had tantrums, right? Or specifically often you would take them and you would hold them until they calmed down.
Well, let me give us specific details, because I've even shared this with a few parents. Occasionally parents reach out to me and they have a child who's particularly difficult.
Or belligerent.
Yeah, well, and the kid goes
so.
bonkers, is like breaking things, destroying things, hurting other siblings, like going completely bonkers. And so this was a strategy I used extremely sparingly. I mean, maybe 10 times total ever with 7 children, is when the kid went completely bonkers. Instead of banishing them
Time out.
to some other room where they'd go break things or hurt people or do whatever. Yeah, instead of
some other punishment.
I'm like, I'm gonna hold you, and this was critically important. I was in a good state. I was totally cool. I'm not angry. I'm like, hey buddy, I'm gonna hold you here because you're just out of control right now. And so I'm gonna hold you because I love you, and we're gonna work through this right now together. But you're being absolutely unreasonable. And I'm talking to them more. They're
So
like
you're
trying to
regulate
kick and
with
punch, bite and pinch.
Headbutt you
Yeah,
sometimes.
they're trying to
or
headbutt.
bonk.
And like I'm strong, and so I didn't squeeze them.
You didn't hurt
I
them.
didn't hurt them. I was able to wrap my arms around them without squeezing and leave my arms in place because I have the strength to do that. So
While talking in a calm voice, calming them down and telling them how to calm down. Like,
take a breath. As soon as you're calm, I'm going to let you go. As soon as you stop going ballistic, you are free. The moment you chillax, you're free. You're just out of control. So take a couple deep breaths, calm down, and you're good. And they would. It only took a short time. They were just like, when they realized, like, hey, I'm serious here. Like, you're out of control. Like, you're going bonkers, kiddo. And so I'm going to hold you until you calm down. And they would calm down and let them go. Boom.
Yeah.
It's not. So it was never like 5 minutes of me, like this wrestling match, squeezing, threatening, angry, upset. It's like,
It have been once or twice with all of our children when it went
maybe with you
5 or 10 minutes.
Never happened with me. No, it never happened with me because maybe it seems that long when they're in it, but
maybe
like
it seemed longer because I never timed it.
Because no child wants this. We have active kids. They're not going to want to just sit there and be like, oh, I have to sit perfectly still.
Yeah.
Dad means business. They're like, this sucks. Well, I'm going to calm down, and then boom, done.
Yeah. So that's the point. The point is they don't like it. And because they don't like it, they want to do whatever they need to do to get out of it, which just happens to be calming down, which is what you want, and which helps them because being calm helps them.
And every time they would calm down, and then they would hug me. They would want to cuddle. They'd climb back up on my lap. And it was like, they're like, okay, I'm calm. And then they're calm, like, hey, come here. Then they wanted me to hold them in love. And it was immediately like they went from being held to like chillax to, oh, can I hold you now? I'm like, yes, of course. And that was just amazing, real bonding. Right. That tactic was extremely rare and only when the kids lost their bananas. I mean, they were bonkers.
But I do remember with some of the kids that there was a period of time where you had to use it, let's say 3 or 4 times in a row over a period of, I don't know, some months. And that was enough to help them learn how to regulate themselves better so that then the need for that was prevented, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
So that's one of the boundaries we're talking about, where if you do have these boundaries in place, if your kid pushes up against the fence and they realize this is a fence and dad's going to hold me physically to resist me or to control me until I control myself, they learn to control themselves before they ever get to that fence. Right?
And I think that was only with maybe 2 of our kids.
Well, yeah, because
so out of 7, just 2 of them had that kind of personality to just go all out.
But I also think that, well, one, of course, our own parenting strategies improved. So we were better at attachment and we were better at preventing meltdowns. And because if the older kids learn something, it's like then it gets passed on to the other. So it's like it becomes a part of the family culture. And so those techniques aren't needed as much because the family culture is already established. Now, if you already have a child who is crazy like this, then you might need a strategy like this and you might need to do it for a period of time, especially if they're older, so that they learn to understand that, yes, you have boundaries. Here's the boundary. And if you hold those boundaries, they learn to respect them. And more importantly, they feel much safer.
Almost every time now.
More.
Yeah. Almost every time now that parent comes to me with a child who's just kind of uncontrollable and out of control, I can't think of a single exception where it wasn't related to sleep and food.
And lack of attachment.
Well, yeah, yes. But the primary factors were sleep and food. And we didn't know that back then we learned all this stuff. Like now, anytime it comes to me, is like the very first factors for any kind of behavioral stuff. We're gonna look at sleep, make sure they're really getting enough sleep, and very often they're not. We're gonna make sure they're eating good food. Very often they're not. And then we're gonna say, well, how's your connection with your kid?
And
Like
how much
real
attention are they
attachment.
getting from you,
Yeah,
basically?
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to continue with her email. So, it was called holding time. We went off on that. And she says, it was horrific. I get sick just thinking about that poor baby sweating and red in the face while she slowly gave up her will and submitted to my monster of a mother.
So don't do that.
Don't do that. Because if your child gives up their will, trust me, that is not a good thing. And at some point in their life, they're going to resent you for that. She continues, I forgot to add that this sister is my mom's thought slave. She quite literally cannot think for herself on any subject unless she clears it first with mom. She's 20 this year, and she has never spent a day away from my parents. No college, no career, no boyfriend, nothing. Just the mommying they call homeschooling out in their farm, totally isolated from everything, which is something else I wanted to mention. Offering resources and then throwing your kids into a flood of possibilities doesn't work. We She failed to teach us any kind of routine or schedule or habits and never set a good example of how to use it herself. Okay, so this is essentially talking about the idea of boundaries. Like we can't just bond with our kids or provide resources for them or whatever without modeling it for them, without setting up the clear boundaries and expectations, and then
And
holding
systems and
those
strategies
and systems
and
and
teaching your
strategies. Right.
kids while they're in your house, you've got to teach them all the systems and strategies that work
Right.
for every aspect of life. So, I mean, you think through physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and financial. They've got to have
Yeah.
systems and strategies for all of those things. So when they turn 18, 19, 20, and they're ready to launch,
25.
they have all those things.
Yeah.
They've got all those tools. They've been practicing it for years, literally years. Like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. I've been doing it for a very long time. You show them the way. You give them the tools, you help them practice, you coach them through it so they get better at it. It's literal skill development so that they're ready to launch and they're autonomous. Instead of, like in this case, and in many cases, we have these, 20-year-old babies. They can't think for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They can't make decisions. They can't solve problems. They can't figure things out. They won't go anywhere because they're afraid or underdeveloped, underskilled.
So she continues because she's like, another thing to be careful about when you guys are talking about your kids needing you until they're 25. Now, maybe the way we've worded it has come across like that. I hope we haven't said that our kids need us until they're 25. What we have talked about and the reason why we talk about it is because, and I grew up with this understanding too, we've been taught to believe societally that at 18 you're an adult. And that's just not true. That's actually a misconception. Adulthood officially starts later, and it varies for every person. Like there's no hard number, but scientifically, generally the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until 24 or 25. Now, can you start becoming an adult before that? Of course. The more you take on responsibility, the more you mature and the more you become adult-like. So when we talk about until 25, what we're trying to do is help shift the current paradigm that, at 18, you're an adult and now you should be ready to do your own thing. That may be true for some, but some may not be ready at 18. And again, because every child is unique and individual, we have to respect those differences and not feel like, oh, my child is a failure because they're 18 and they are still at home or whatnot.
What a
Well,
what
and
a silly idea.
even worse, okay, because I want to clarify on this too, because I've had people say to me on my Instagram sometimes, they're like, well, there's nothing wrong staying home. And I would agree with that because if you look at history and if you look at other cultures, in fact, we had this woman from South Africa who was like, it's normal in South Africa to live with your parents until you're 30 or older. But the point is, and the difference is, you're a contributing member to the family household, not just someone who sits at home and plays video games while your mommy takes care of you. That's the major difference. Your child can stay at home. That's fine. But they need to be maturing and progressing and contributing to the family and to their own growth and development, not just being taken care of.
Like real palpable progress. So
Yeah.
they are pursuing education, they're starting businesses, they're
Mhm.
building relationships, they're really getting after it. That's a sign of a healthy young adult right
Yeah.
there. Like they are moving. So the fact that they might live in your house for a little bit, for a few years, okay, whatever. But they are growing and prepping for life. That's phenomenal. What I was going to say earlier is what a silly idea. What a just stupid notion to think that if as adults we have to ask for advice or help, that somehow that's bad or
Right.
wrong. Like as long as long as you are leveling up, you need mentors
Well, and that's
and
true of everyone.
coaches.
That's true of us.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
Like,
so I'm like,
that never goes away.
if you're 50 and you're like, I'm pushing a new level here and I need some insight and wisdom from somebody who's gone farther than me, that doesn't make me less of a
Right.
man or like somehow incapable.
Mhm.
If you feel like somebody's like they're a millionaire, but they want to be a decamillionaire, they better start asking.
Right.
It's like, oh, I can't ask because that would make me look uneducated. That makes me look weak or dumb. So I'm not going to ask. Well, okay, then you condemn yourself to your current level. If you got somebody with hundreds of millions, but they want to make a billion, they're asking questions. Like they're seeking those next levels. So there's
So that's just
absolutely
the
nothing wrong with our young adult children, like still chasing, still growing, still looking for guidance and help and mentoring and coaching. It's a great
well,
thing.
right. And with that premise that you just gave, that would really continue for a lifetime
Yep.
because as long as we have lived experience that we can share with our children, well, then, yeah, when they're 50 and they're asking us for advice, that's a good thing.
Yep.
That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like,
So
that's how it should
I'm
ideally work.
I'm 25 years older than our oldest. That's 25 years. I better have made that count. And if I didn't, that's on me. That's an epic failure.
Mm.
If so in life, we have two options. You can level up or you can level off. Most people level off. Most parents level off. So no wonder their kids stop coming to them for advice or
Mhm.
guidance because you're like, well, I'm going to go somewhere else because my parents are going nowhere, doing nothing. They've leveled off in life. So that's how you lose influence. That's how you lose your
Yeah.
kids don't come back to you. It's like, why? Why would I go to you? I hear that all the time from adults. Like full grown men, they're like, I can't go to my dad. I can't go to my mom. Like they don't know any of this stuff. When I want to really lean in and level up and solve big problems, they're kind, they're loving, but I can't go to them. They have no idea. I hear that all the time, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm going to keep leveling up like crazy. So I'm always going to be 25 years ahead of my oldest and more with the others. So I'm going to keep chasing greatness so that my kids are always wanting to come and be like, dude, mom and dad are crushing it. I'm going to keep
I
learning
need their
from them.
advice.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I guess if we have given this idea that we're talking about our children always quote unquote needing us, I mean, essentially that's what we mean, what you just summarized. Our kids needing us or wanting advice from us is in that mentor mentee relationship throughout life, which is how life ideally is meant to be lived. Like if you
Absolutely.
think about our ancestors hundreds or thousands of years ago, that's how it worked. You went to the people in your village or your parents who had more wisdom than you, and that's where you learn. That's who you learn from. That's the model we're trying to live here. Not that, as she continues here, this doesn't mean they're totally incapable of going out on their own. No, of course, it doesn't mean that. And in fact, all
We're
of our
good to go.
core children, they've already
Yep.
been out on their own multiple times. They've gone out and worked. They've lived away from us for months at a time. They've been out, but we always welcome them back when they want to come back because we see them as still in this transitional phase. Even our daughter, who's the oldest and 23, almost 23 and married, I still see her in this transitional phase of moving into full adulthood completely because of, well, the prefrontal cortex for one thing. But she continues, the needs of children from their parents changes. And I know you guys know this. I'm mostly writing this down for my own benefit. And that's true. Like we just laid out, like they're going to need us, quote unquote,
Different ways.
in different ways, but ideally throughout their entire life. And that's fine.
My goal, like I said already, I want to be useful. I want to be helpful.
Yeah,
I
right.
want to be leveling up so much that I'm a resource to them if they want to learn what I'm learning, what I'm experiencing, all the trial and error I'm doing for all those years. I'm not just getting older.
Mm-hmm.
Like I absolutely refuse to just get older. I'm getting better.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
And wiser.
I'm reading a book a week. let's go. I mean, I'm trying new things. I'm leveling up constantly. So I have something to give. So if
Right.
they want it, if I have a good relationship with them, they're going to want it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and she says, I'm 29 this year and I still wish I could have good advice from my parents. Like you already mentioned this, on, the odd life question, but I want advice from them, not direction. And specifically, if you have a poor relationship with your parents, their advice can come across as some sort of control over you. Where if you have a strong attachment and your parents, the strong attachment with the respect of free will, you know that your parents' advice for you is in your very best interest, and ultimately they're going to respect your choices, right?
Well, good mentoring is more questions and less declarative statements.
And lecturing.
So even with our kids that are young adults, I rarely tell them what they should do. I ask them questions. And
Mhm.
sometimes they get frustrated, like, just tell me. I'm like, nope. You make a decision.
Yeah.
You decide. But I'm walking them through the options, the possibilities, the outcomes, the unintended consequences. I'm doing for them what I wish somebody would have done for me. I had somebody there. So I'm asking a lot of questions and helping them prevent a lot of unnecessary errors and mistakes, but still leaving the decision in their, it's in their court. So I love what she's saying there. It's like, hey, just give me some advice. Don't tell me what to do. I
Mhm.
love that.
Yeah. Well, and then she just closes. She says, that's actually the reason I listen to your podcast. I see you too as the parents I wish I had. So thank you. I just think that's so sweet. And thank you very much. And that is why we do this, because I realize that all of us in the entire world basically are coming from, because we're all human, backgrounds, imperfect childhoods. And the goal in my mind is to continue to increase that knowledge, the understanding, the skills, so that we can become better and better and better parents generationally, so that each generation gets even better. Because I know, even for me, my dad was a better parent and my mom, than they had been parented. And I'm grateful for that generational shift that they made, right? I'm grateful for the foundation that they built for me so that I can add to it and build upon it. I remember even my dad once talking about the whole little story of, if we stand on the shoulders of those that came before us, and that's kind of the idea I have. But in that context, it's our job now we are the adults, now we are the parents, and as the parents, it's our role to pass on the best legacy we can of good parenting to our children, so that they can build upon that and we can have even better relationships and change in the world to make the world a better place.
Amen. Get the skills, very specific parenting skills, and it makes all the difference. Totally alters your outcomes. Gets different results. Love that. Is the founding members option still available for our new parenting course?
Hopefully, actually, I don't know. By the time they listen to this episode, it may be over, but if it's not over, you should definitely take advantage of it.
If not, just get in anyways. This parenting course
Let's just
is
mention it right now,
amazing.
because we're going to Scotland this week. Well, okay, by the time you listen to this episode, we will be in Scotland. We will be on our couples trip in Scotland. So yeah, it'll still be available. When we get back from that Scotland trip is when we will start, let me say continue.
Because we've already started it.
We've already started it.
Yep.
We've already started creating our Extraordinary Parent Mentoring Method course, and we will continue it and work on finishing it once we get back from Scotland. But right now we have the founding member option available, which I think you can still take advantage of. So
Yes. So
I would
take
do
advantage
that
of it.
before it's
Yep.
too late.
Get in. This stuff is awesome. It's so needed. The work we do in our homes is the most important work there is, and it will be the most rewarding work as well. And it can be lifetime work.
Mhm.
If we do it well, we'll keep a good relationship with our children for the rest of our lives, which is what I want.
And enjoyable work.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be
Unpleasant.
and
Yes.
horrible.
That's
And
what kills
for
me.
too many people,
Yeah.
too many parents, I think it is.
It's just
I
terrible
think
burden.
they feel like parenting is miserable.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be that way. I honestly I love being a parent, and I
Same.
find it to be enjoyable work because I've gained the skills that makes every day enjoyable.
Yeah. I love being a father.
Beautiful.
I
Yeah.
love mentoring my kids. So parenting should be one of the greatest joys in your life, not one of the biggest unpleasant burdens.
Mm.
So if it is an unpleasant burden, it's just because you're doing it wrong. And
Yeah,
that's good news, because
that's
then
good
you're like,
news.
oh, okay, I just get a different skill, a different tool, a different lever, a different tactic, a new system, a new strategy. And that's what Rachel and I are doing all the time. We're sharing what we've learned from decades of study and coaching people all around the world. And like, hey, this stuff just
Hands-on
works.
experience.
Yeah, it just works. So love you guys. Reach upward.